Welcome everyone to AURI Connects Webinar Wednesday, part of AURI Connects monthly online series featuring updates on the work that AURI is doing to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products. I'm Dan Scogan, the AURI Director of Government and Industry Relations, and your host on Webinar Wednesdays. The AURI Connects program is hosted by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute in Minnesota. This program aims to actively engage all participants in the food and ag industry to improve competitiveness of producers, businesses, and entrepreneurs through ongoing, purposeful connection of resources and partners along the value chain, and increased knowledge of opportunities, technologies, and trends. Remember that this event is being recorded and archived and can be found later at auri.org. Today, we'll be getting a one-year anniversary update on the development of the industrial hemp industry in Minnesota. Joining us for this conversation is AURI engineer Riley Gordon and Harold Stanislawski, AURI Business Development Director. Remember that you will be muted during the presentation, but you can send us written questions via the Q&A portal. We do ask that any regulatory questions be directed to the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And with that, Harold Stanislawski and Riley Gordon, welcome to Webinar Wednesday.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is afternoon now, and we are delighted, Riley and I, to give you this update from 1 year ago. We started Building an Industrial Hemp Industry in Minnesota initiative, and this will be an update on our activities over the last year. So let's advance the next slide and let's get started. First of all, a little bit about AURI. We've been around the state for over 30 years, and again, our mission is to foster long-term economic benefit through the development of new value-added uses for agricultural products. Next slide. Our focus areas include food, which might include grains, powders, hemp hearts, biobased products, which could include work and stalks and various fiber and herd applications. You'll hear more about that during our presentation. Co-products, that's several byproducts resulting from processing hemp. We will address that as well. And also the ability to generate renewable energy by hemp biofuels. We have a lot of activity in the state of Minnesota, and this map here just gives you some indication of the projects that AURI has had over the last year or so across the state, and you can see it's widespread. AURI's services include applied research and development, and Riley Gordon will talk some about that, hands-on scientific assistance, and then innovation networking, which is part of our project and business development team. So let's talk about what the objectives were of the hemp initiative from a year ago as a review, and then we'll get started on what has happened. First of all, we're going to focus on developing the value chain for Minnesota and the Midwest. So that requires working closely with producers and processors and identifying industry needs. This could include analysis of CBD oil, hemp seed meal, hemp flour, hemp fiber for quality control, and identification of new uses, which may include fuel, feed, and fiber. Then identification of hemp-based markets. You're going to hear a little bit about that today, and much of the information that we obtain is from various sites all over the world and country and partners. Identify state of the industry for processing and co-product approval for feed, which is important. And then, of course, we wanted to release a public report with findings of the opportunities and hurdles, and that was done last year. Let's begin with the milestones of the Minnesota journey in hemp. Of course, in 2014, the Farm Bill allowed research pilot industrial hemp by state approval. Minnesota quickly jumped on in 2015 and got the state involved in the hemp industry. And by 2016, we were growing our first industrial hemp crop. Then the big year came, 2018, Farm Bill passes, and it allows industrial hemp production nationwide, a big milestone on that day for sure. And now in 2020, the Minnesota hemp infrastructure continues to emerge at a rapid rate. with things like crop insurance being available this year, and with banking and financing becoming a bit more clear. All these are very important steps in moving an industry forward. CBD oil extraction, processing, and value chain was happening in the state. We have a number of extractors that are up and running in the state, which is good for the CBD side of the business. Food grade industrial hemp oil and protein plant was established. Fiber shed development, research, and studies is underway, and we're going to talk a bit about that later on. Feed characterization, looking at future animal feed and approval pending. We'll talk about what we've learned in that area and where we're at. And then, of course, in order to have a viable industry, we need seed production and processing interest in our state to make sure that we have a viable industry long term. So, what are the challenges faced by hemp cultivators today? And in our earlier report in 2018, we had a chart similar to this. We looked at it again, and nothing has really changed in this, is that still the challenges faced by far are finding processors to deal with the crop. And that has been the major focus of what we have been involved with at AURI, is to look at this processing opportunity for our state and within the region here, so that growers have a marketplace for the product that they produce. Second to that was a lack of banking services. That's always important, because without a good lender who's with you, that can be a major impediment. And then all of the other things there, as you see them decline in importance, were all critical to the overall success of the hemp industry. So on policy updates, Dan Scogan said that all regulatory questions should be posed to the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. They are the appropriate people to deal with questions. But I did want to mention that there are some other sources that one can check to see about policy updates. One would be the National Hemp Association, the United States Department of Ag, and we have Minnesota Hemp Associations in our state that you can check with. And courtesy of RDL and Associates LLC, Dave Ladd did provide me 4 points here that are important as updates on where we are with the interim final rule, and which would include sampling methodology and all of that. And I encourage you to look at that after today's webinar. And then all of the other items that are listed here would be important updates so that you know where we are in policy within the state of Minnesota. So the U.S. hemp-based product sales, are they growing? And if we look at 2014, when we started this hemp adventure in Minnesota, all the way out to 2020, you can see a nice, if the trend is your friend, we're going in the right direction in terms of sales of hemp-based products. And predicted in year 2022, there will be even more sales. And this was provided courtesy of the Hemp Business Journal and New Frontier data. So it's going in the right direction. Now, what is moving in the right direction? Well, even though CBD has had its challenges, and some by overproduction and some regulatory concerns, the hemp industry is predicted on the CBD side to grow from where it is currently to the number that you see on your screen. And as we look at supplements and personal care and consumer textiles and industrial applications, and focus on the industrial applications a bit, you can see that there is a nice uptick in projected sales on the industrial applications as there is in food. So how about product launches? This is always an indicator of how things are going in the hemp side of the business. And you can see that we had a nice product launch in 2013 with 26 product launches. But what we're seeing today is a pretty steady announcement of new project launches in the hemp space. Hemp-derived CBD sales in pet and animal markets. And again, we're not going to focus on too much from a regulatory side here, but this is just what's happening in the country nationwide. And you can see that those kinds of sales and markets have occurred as well. So I did want to bring this to your attention as the viewers of this webinar, that many folks that we deal with in the hemp side, particularly the CBD side, have used the U.S. Hemp Authority seal and certification so that the products that they put on the marketplace are in line with all the current regulations and so forth. So we encourage folks to look at the U.S. Hemp Authority for certification, and as we think it has a lot of merit in moving products forward. So hemp is a food product. We're going to talk about this a bit. And again, this has been some solid growth in this area as the product launches have indicated. And we've had a number of fields in Minnesota that have been grown for food, and they're grass approved, generally recognized as safe. And there's currently a lot of research going on as to how to incorporate hemp protein into all kinds of various foods for the benefits that are there. So our next slide, Riley, I'd like you to talk about just some of the benefits we see on the hemp food side.
Yeah, thanks, Harold. And so here's just a couple figures from our hemp report, which Harold was mentioning, that was released about a year ago. So just kind of highlighting some of the nutritional aspects of hemp seeds, and these are for both for de-hulled hemp seeds or the hemp hearts, they call them on the market. So you can notice that hemp seeds are relatively high in omega-3, but especially omega-6s when compared to chia and flaxseed, and definitely higher protein value there. And then on the amino acid profile, fairly complete profile other than it being limiting in leucine and lysine. So that's the reason why it lacks a little bit in the PETA score, which is how they rate proteins in the food world. So if that kind of opens the doors for different blending opportunities for hemp protein to make a complete protein, but it's fairly complete as is, just being lacking in those two amino acids there. And so I just wanted to give an update on some work that's going on at the University of Minnesota that's being funded through the Plant Protein Innovation Center there. And they're working at optimizing hemp protein isolation extraction, and they're focusing on two different methods currently. And they're running different hemp cultivars or different grain varieties through these trials. And they'll be focusing on scale-up feasibility, color, structural, and functional characteristics of the end products to select an optimal isolation method for hemp protein isolate. And this update comes from Tom Michaels, who's heading up that research over there. And he's also doing some work on different breeding techniques to look at weather selecting different cultivars for Minnesota, and looking at the different cultivars for different end uses, whether it be CBD, fiber, grain, etc. So interesting research going on there at the University of Minnesota currently. And this is a slide I just always like to share, that these are just on the food side. This is generally some of the equipment and processing that is seen, and a lot of this we do have capability to do at our Waseca lab, AURI Waseca lab, and we have supported different projects for cleaning hemp seed, for pressing, for developing protein powders. So we do have an indent separator now in Waseca. We have the cold press. This is actually our cold press pictured here. We have bench scale and pilot scale sifting equipment, milling and sifting to produce protein powders. And we do have a new impact puller that we're setting up in our new facility that is generally used to create hemp hearts or de-hulled hemp seeds. And then the other couple areas that we've done some research in is creating hemp milk similar to like almond milk, where you'd put just hot water and a cheesecloth to create a milk product, a plant-based milk product. And then there's opportunity, we think, for hemp flour and or seeds in hemp beer. And we have seen there's a couple on the market today that are pretty good. So current grain economics, I just want to mention, yields for hemp grain are roughly around, 1,000 to 1,500 pounds an acre, depending on a number of different factors. But with grain, you can grow large acreage. And right now, the market's right at about 40 cents a pound for conventional hemp grain, and organics going for right around $1 a pound. And just talked with Manitoba Harvest a few days ago, and they're still offering organic contracts right now south of the border. So that's a pretty good market opportunity that exists right now for growers to get into if you're I know they contracted about 1,000 acres south of the border last year in North Dakota and northwestern Minnesota, and heard back that they're still looking for farmers to grow down here. So if anyone is interested in that, you can feel free to reach out to me. My contact will be at the end, and I can get you in touch with them. Drying and cleaning remain the two biggest concerns surrounding growing the grain. Getting it clean to 99.95% purity using a number of the different cleaning equipment I showed on the last slide, indents, air screeners, and a gravity table essentially. And then drying it right down to 9% right away. There's been plenty of farmers who've had issues with molds and mildews and whatnot with the grain, so getting that dry is very important. And Harold, pass it back to you for this slide.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Riley. I just wanted to show this slide again because the table is just more self-explanatory. This pie chart, which indicates that 1.1 billion US hemp-based product sales were done in 2018. Now, here we are a couple of years later, these numbers have changed some. Certainly on the food side, they're projected to be changed quite a bit. But this is a good picture of kind of what the pie looks like currently with slight modifications. And we're expecting that on the food side and the industrial application side, that those things will increase. And of course, the CBD side will increase. There's a lot of regulatory things that come into play here as to how wide the gate gets opened. But certainly there is no one suggesting that this industry is going to shrink. It's only going to grow. So I just wanted to show that this is still the case, and information provided by the Hemp Business Journal. So Riley, I think here we want to get into the opportunity for hemp and feed and pet food. And I think it's worthy here, Riley, just to review what some of the characteristics of the hemp have in feed.
Yeah, and thanks, Harold. And so again, if you've tuned into Harold and I's discussions before, this is kind of this will be not a new thing for you to listen to, but we think it's important, so we want to touch on it again. What we did was look at the hemp, and all this information is in our report as well, but we looked at the hemp cake, so the meal after pressing the seed, the hemp flour after CBD is extracted from the flour, and then we looked at the hemp seed hulls, which is after you de-hull it through an impact huller. These are all the co-products that would be left behind. So we looked at the total digestible nutrients or energy and the crude protein of these sources from a feed perspective. And we use Dairyland feed testing in Wisconsin to do all our testing for feed values. We do ANDF, crude protein, fat, ash, calcium, all those things. There's just a picture of the flour, what it goes when it's, that's a spent flour there. And then we were able to make a really nice pellet out of that. And what we did down in Waseca is Al Deering, who's on staff, has animal nutrition background. And so he was able to compare based off the crude protein and energy or TDN values compared to where corn, soybean meal, and alfalfa hay were at a market price, and come up with a theoretical market value for these three different co-products from hemp. So this kind of just gives an idea of where that value lies with these products. There's definitely value there. And I just did kind of a rough, math there for 1,000 pounds. Say you get 1,000 pounds per acre yield of grain for a certain year. If you got 30% oil content, typically in a hemp seed, about 90% extraction we were seeing with the cold press in Waseca, you'd have about 730 pounds of hemp seed cake per acre, which would be about $80 an acre at that $3.50 a bushel corn market price. And you see how those market values will fluctuate with the corn and soybean meal there too. With all that being said, kind of a broken record here since the last update as well, that we still have not got to the point where any hemp product can be marketed legally as a feed. So I'm going to pass it back to Harold just to give a quick update. This heavily involves the Association of American Feed Control Officials and getting international feed numbers for all these products, which is a long and expensive process.
Yeah, thanks, Riley. Let's go to the next slide immediately here so we can show this. AURI has been keeping in close contact with the Hemp Feed Coalition to find out, okay, where are they in the regulatory approval process with hemp? And we came across this after visiting with them, and this is an extremely important and good chart. First of all, let's start with chickens with hemp cake meal. Currently, that is initiated application through AFCO. So that is actually in process of, the application has been initiated, the trials are done. So AFCO is looking at that right now in the terms of cake meal and such for chickens. So that's good news. We would expect to hear something in the near future on that. In terms of oil, they've initiated a feed trial on the oil side in chickens, and there's a length of study as per FDA and CBM for the whole seed. Now let's look at lambs. Lambs, they have initiated a feed trial right now, and I want to point out that the reason they use lambs is because when the studies are done, the meat has to be discarded. And so they don't want to discard, you know, a nice beef animal because it's more expensive. So if we get the work done on the lambs, then generally, because they're all ruminants, they should be able to be applied to the other ruminant animals. But you can see that that has had an initiated feed trial, so that's good news. And then you go down the line with horses. Their principal investigator has been appointed there now. Swine, the same thing. There's been an investigator appointed, so soon those bars will go up to the next level. And we have some published studies on fish, and of course on dogs with using some of the oils for that. That's on a feed trial right now. So lots of good things are going on through the Hemp Feed Coalition and through the AFCO process and approval chart. So don't be disturbed, don't be dismayed. Things are on the way when it comes to feed approval. Next slide. So let's move into hemp fiber, and I just want to say, as the business development director for AURI, this is extremely important of how do you move a hemp fiber industry forward in terms of investor interest. And we have been working with a number of private parties and entrepreneurs in the state on feasibility studies and trying to form relationships with existing fiber processing partners, learning a lot, talking to brokers all over the state and Canada. Riley and I have had so many discussions with different people, and so things are moving in the right direction. It takes time, and I want to remind people that the Farm Bill only got passed in 2018. We're about 19 or 20 months into this thing, and a lot of things have happened, and I think we're moving in the right direction. So Riley, you could maybe finish this out talking about the steps of what we're going to do with this hemp stock.
Thanks, Harold. I'm actually just going to move on to the coming slides here. So this one kind of shows you what a hemp fiber and what a stalk looks like. So there's on the outside, you have the bast fiber, and then on the inside, you actually have the hurd or the woody core, which makes up about 70%, the hurd, and then the bast fiber makes up about 30% of that stalk. And so going back here, looking at the different processing steps here. So for once the hemp seeds are, extracted or harvested, the hemp stalks generally are left to ret in the field, and I'll go over what retting is in a little bit. And then you can make a number of different products from these fibers and hurds that we'll get into a little bit of the processing to get to these different end products and what we've learned there and different partners that we've come into. But Harold, just pass it back to you. Just
sure. I just want to bring this up as Riley and I have looked at the markets. This is some information from some of the folks in Canada that we've talked to as kind of realistic targets of where this market could go. They feel that the textiles and the construction, the kitty litter and biocomposite markets are as stated for North America at its current projection. So this is good news. So we're going to be keeping tabs on this stuff and monitoring how this goes. And I want to point out that there are a lot of websites that say you can get marketing information on hemp and markets. I'd be very, very careful and skeptical. Certainly call us, because there's a lot of information out there that is not very good information when it comes to the markets. So with that, what you saw there was pretty good. Go ahead, Riley.
Okay, yeah. So for hemp fiber brokers, so we've been kind of looking around and trying to figure out really our biggest thing that we've been trying to figure out is what what the end users are looking for in a product. So if you're looking for herd for for bedding or for oil absorbents, or you're looking for herd for biocomposites or what have you, it's going to need to be processed differently. And then similarly on the fiber side, if you're going to a full textile material with the fiber, it's going to need to be processed and decorticated differently than if you were going to an insulation or a erosion control mat, for example, with the fiber. So we're trying to connect with these different fiber brokers, and there's not a whole lot going on in the US with knowledge on this right now, but folks in Canada that we've connected to and groups in Europe seem to have this really figured out, where there's groups such as Sanico, Procotex here that has transformed products and raw materials for all of these different industries you see here, and they have them spec'd out for the different industries and for different end users, which is really where this industry will need to go eventually. And so we're trying to wrap our heads around just kind of what different levels of processing is required and what different specs are required for different end uses for hemp fiber and herd. So a good example of this is a group in Canada called Canadian Rockies Hemp Corporation, and Aaron Barr is the CEO or the president there. And it's in Bruderheim, which is near Edmonton, I believe. And they have 3 different decortication technologies now on site after touring Europe and different European countries, looking at different decortication technologies. They have several set up now, and they're able to, this is just kind of snippets from their website here, but you can see that they have herd specs, fiber specs for different end uses, and you can order these materials for your different end uses on their site, and they already understand what specs they need to hit to get to those. And they contract, so they have a growing side on their website as well. They'll contract with growers right through their website. They just, advertise it as a very similar process to growing hay, where you put it up in bales. First you red it, and then they put it up in bales, and this particular group, the farmer seeds it, and they'll do the rest, come out, cut, rake, bale, and stack it. Or they'll pay you extra to do that if you have the equipment to do that on your own. So just kind of one of the definite leaders in the hemp fiber industry in North America right now, I would say. And then speaking of Alberta, just touching a little bit more on the nice little industry that's kind of happening right now in Alberta. It seems this Innotech Alberta, they've been operating for several years now. They have about a 1 ton an hour facility. It's pilot scale for decortication. And talking with Byron James, who heads up that facility up there. And that's in Vegreville. And the herd goes to just biofiber. They're in Airdrie, and they make hempcrete blocks, so that you can see a picture there. It's a structural hempcrete block, which is a lime-based binder, water, and then the hemp herd mixed with some natural minerals to make a very light, breathable material that it's a building material, insulation material. It's breathable. It's got a high thermal mass, so it holds on to heat and lets that out and saves on heating and cooling costs. And it's just gets harder and harder throughout its 100-year life cycle as it sequesters carbon consistently as it's curing. Very interesting material. And what's interesting about this particular group that's producing it is that you see that they're actual structural Lego, kind of like Lego blocks. So you actually don't need a frame to hold those up. So it's a really cool product there, and they're looking at expanding right now. So we're in talks with that group all the time and learning from them. And then the fiber from Innotech actually goes to biocomposites group, Terra Fiber, where they make hemp grow mats and erosion control blankets and a bunch of different interesting products from the fiber. So just kind of cool to highlight that's already an industry that's happening up there. And oh yeah, and we wanted to touch quickly on this group. So this is Ag Processing Solutions out of Montana, have partnered up with Forsberg, who is a equipment supplier. They usually do cleaning equipment for grains and whatnot up in Thief River Falls, Minnesota. And these two groups have partnered together. And so going back to talking about when, we're focused on looking at what processing equipment makes sense for going to which end materials. So if you're just after the hurd for whatever application, what have you, maybe it's the hempcrete, maybe it's bedding, maybe it's an absorbent. This process that they've identified here seems extremely cost effective. It produces, that's myself holding some of the clean hurd that comes from this process, which is definitely meeting hempcrete specs and very clean hurd product. You can see the fiber would still need some cleaning, and it would be shorter fibers coming from this process, as it is a hammer milling process. So it'll go through a bale buster and then be hammer milled, and then it's size separated with shaker table and aspiration to clean up the hurd, and then the fiber would need to be cleaned a little bit more, but could be going into things such as insulation, hemp erosion control blankets, such as Terra Fiber makes. And we've talked previously about supercapacitor with graphene being through a carbonization process being a possibility, where you would do, it's a thermochemical process where you would create carbon-based nanosheets from the hemp fiber, and that would be able to store energy. That comes from a patent that was generated at the University of Alberta a number of years back. So this is a process that's way cheaper than traditional decortication, and might make sense for depending on what end markets you're going after for with your hurd and your fiber. And just on that, Harold actually spent a day with Roto Chopper, who's out of Minnesota, and this would be a similar kind of concept here, where they're just really brute force hammer milling type process here on large hemp bales to produce a similar or to get a similar yield for hurd and shorter fibers. I don't know, Harold, did you want to speak?
Riley, I just want to say something real quick about this. You know, well, what's interesting about this, when you look at long-term commercialization of hemp fiber applications, this kind of machine, which you could call the combine, if you will, could process hemp fiber very quickly, put it into a format that then could be further separated out using the techniques that Riley just mentioned. But it would be, you could store that and move on quickly. So a machine like this can do many, many tons an hour. And while not everyone would want to own these, this could be kind of a custom approach to things. So it's very interesting. It was done in Enderlin, North Dakota.
Yep. Another group just wanted to give an update, Formation Ag. They have for years now had a mobile decorticator that they've been marketing, and they seem to have done some significant updates to this piece of equipment. They now have hurd cleaning and fiber cleaning online with this now. It's not just a decorticator, which is just the first step of the whole decortication and separation and cleaning process. So they have kind of a complete system that they're marketing now, process up to 1 ton an hour. I think it's coming in at around 380,000. Got a quote a few months back on this, but seems to be an interesting group. They're definitely very mechanically inclined, and been working with hemp fiber for a number of years out in Colorado. And then this is just a couple groups from Europe that we've come across that are producing the large, this would be a central processing facility for higher grade, textile grade hemp fiber, crates, and Laroche is a French company. And we do actually know of this, a group in Montana, IND Hemp, I believe they're called, and they've just read an article recently that they've invested in Laroche equipment to produce textile grade fiber and fiber for biocomposites in Montana. So that's an exciting piece of news that we've recently come across. So these generally are very expensive lines. So again, whatever you're going for your end use, you got to make sure it kind of makes the processing make sense and you're hitting the specs that you need to satisfy your markets is really the main point there. This is our decorticator that we have set up just in Waseca. Finished setting this up about a month ago. So we have our first bale of hemp that came from a research project up in Staples, Minnesota. We got that bale of hemp ready to go. We're going to be separating that and calibrating the decorticator in the next coming weeks. So we're excited to have this. It's the first kind of pilot scale decorticator of its kind in Minnesota and really in the Midwest as far as we know. and it's going to support, different educational days. We'll have people down checking it out once the COVID passes, and we'll be able to produce small amounts of hurd and fiber for product development for groups to either create new products with those materials or update existing products with those. And so we got a couple projects on the docket already that we'll discuss here in a little bit. But yeah, I just wanted to quickly touch on the fact that decortication really is the first step in separation. Well, second step actually next to retting, but there's a number of different cleaning and carding and different processes that you'll go into if you are going to like a textile or a higher grade fiber, or going to really any end market. You're going to need to clean it. So carding devices, and if you want to dye it, this group here in PEI has Prince Edward Island in Canada has a number of different pieces of equipment that takes natural fibers into end products. Yeah, there's so many pieces of equipment here that I won't get into, but we're actually looking at the large carding device with a roving deck, which would take decorticated fiber. It would align it and clean it essentially, and then put it into a roving, which would then be fed into a spinning machine for making yarns. So that's just something that we have on our wish list at this point. And again, this is just kind of the general process for going from field to an end product. And it's pretty oversimplified here, but retting in the field is just the process of allowing the natural enzymes to eat away the pectins and lignans that are holding together the inner woody core of the hurd to the outer fiber. And that's just generally is just done in the field. You just let it lay in the field and let nature do its job there for 3 to 5 weeks. There are enzymatic retting and water retting techniques that happen in China that have some environmental drawbacks, but and then decortication happens. So that's just the raw separation, and then you got your softening and combing and carding and cleaning, all that before you can actually spin it if you were going to go to a textile. And this doesn't even mention if groups that are cottonizing it to actually reduce the staple length and all that to get into like a cotton type fiber. But just quickly on this group too is another group in Canada that we're involved in conversations with. They're involved in a whole lot of things. They've been doing really good research with natural fibers such as flax and hemp for years. It's led by Elvin Ulrich. And really what I wanted to say here is that they've developed, they're in the process of helping with ASTM standards for hemp fiber, and they've developed a fiber quality score sheet to look at, fiber based on color, length, consistency, number of different things, and just a lot of interesting equipment they have to be able to do that. So they're a group that we're definitely happy to be involved with. Harold, I'll pass it over to you for the
Yeah, we'll go pretty quickly. We got a lot of stuff to go through, but this is just a company Riley and I have dialogue with called Hempwood. They make some very, very beautiful hemp hardwoods directly out of the hemp stalks, which could be CBD stalks. They could be fiber-related stalks, and they're pressed under significant PSI and made into a beautiful product. We have had chats with them about how to cut this wood, how to put it together, how to stain it, how to handle the product. I'm very excited about this because this is really low-hanging fruit on, say, CBD stocks to make this kind of product.
Yeah, and just quickly, I'll just mention this is an exciting project that we're having underway. We have Minnesota Department of Transportation, Department of Natural Resources and Agriculture's backing this project and as partners. MnDOT approached us as they are looking to phase out plastic components in their erosion control products. So erosion control blankets here on your bottom left, you can see, and then sediment control logs here right next to it are generally made with natural materials, but there are plastic components. So they're looking at phasing all of that out. And the natural components that they do use is generally coconut fiber and jute fibers that are imported from other countries. So we're going to be looking at creating prototypes completely 100% out of hemp fiber, leveraging our decorticator in Waseca. And if we are funded for this project, we'll be able to purchase one of those Belfast mini mill large carding devices that will be able to then work with yarn twisters in Minnesota to produce yarns to create some of these products. So we would create the prototypes, and then MnDOT would be able to do all the testing in-house to make sure that they meet all the correct ASTM standards and specifications. And then they would do actually in-field testing of these products at their Min Road site in Albertville to be able to update their specifications to actually require hemp fiber if successful. So this is a really interesting project that could result in high utilization of hemp fiber here if successful and awarded.
All right, well, Riley, thank you for that. I'm just going to quickly go over some other hemp fiber end use updates. First of all, you know, if you're going to put up a big plant, you know, a significant one, you're going to have to deal with some big companies who are interested in this. And here we're talking Mercedes, we're talking BMW, and Daimler Chrysler are all interested in using hemp at various different levels and different products from door panels to such. Go to the next slide. This is the plastics company, and what's interesting about this company is they're predominantly using CBD residues and making a polymer with 100% hemp. The current market that they have is 50 million pounds out of a 300 million ton market. So this is a lot of opportunity for the hemp plastic company, and certainly we want to keep in contact with them as they grow and see how we could potentially work with those as well. A little bit on the textiles, how big is it and what's going on. Here you see the numbers, and I just want to point out that the companies like Patagonia, Duluth Trading Company, 10 Tree are using products with up to 55% hemp now. We expect that that could grow. Levi's has cottonized hempwear now with jeans, 69% cotton, 31% hemp. Looks good. Here's a bed on the bottom, 420 Bed Company. 1/5 of that mattress is made from hemp. So here's a little bit on the hemp packaging side, and Riley, if you want to talk about, we got to go pretty quick, but if you want to talk just briefly about that.
Yeah, so just really here quickly, making biocomposites from the hemp fiber is possible with both actually the fiber and micronized herds, and there's a group called Santa Packaging that's currently producing those. And then the other, and that's made with a PLA resin. So you generally have a resin and then a natural fiber for biocomposite. But there's also groups, this hemp plastic company is looking at creating a hemp-based PLA, which PLA is traditionally made from corn. So then you would be able to actually make a 100% hemp biocomposite with the hemp PLA mixed with either a hemp fiber or micronized herd. There's a group that's producing biocomposites with hemp right now up in Fargo that we're consistently working with on different projects, but they do amazing work. They've figured out how to make a 3D printer filament with the hemp herd and PLA resin and create a number of different products, as you can see here, that are really interesting. Moving on from that, just a quick update on Lower Sioux project here that's native reserve in Minnesota that we're working on with consultant Christensen's and Associates. They are looking at creating or building hempcrete homes on their nation by looking at the whole feasibility of growing the hemp there, processing the hemp into the fiber in the herd. They would grow a dual variety and harvest the grain and send that to market. And so we're working with Christensen and Associates right now to put together a whole feasibility study on, you know, what it would cost to put together a facility to process the hemp stalks into herd and fiber, and cleaning the herd, and then taking the herd and doing in situ building of hempcrete with mixers on site and having kind of a community home building type project. So we're pretty excited about this project. It's been a big learning experience for Harold and I as well. And we've learned a lot of really great information that we're going to be able to share with Lower Sioux here in the next couple of weeks. Actually, we're just wrapping this up, so that's an exciting one.
Yeah, Riley, I just want to say, you know, the Lower Sioux Indian community has been very, very good to work with, and just fantastic folks down there. So great project.
Yeah,
but the next slide, I want to talk about CBD. While our CBD portfolio at AURI was down from last year because I think people get more familiar with the crops, there was a little bit less questions. But I wanted to go to the next slide again and point out that the market size and forecast, this is by Brightfield Group, another reputable marketing forecasting company, still suggests that CBD market size and so forth as all the regulations come forward, is expected to grow. So I think this is good news, and certainly within our program here at AURI and working with CBD growers who are innovating products, we want to stay close to you and help you as much as we can with the resources that we have.
Just quickly wanted to give an update on hemp production info from the Minnesota Department of Ag. Just received this a couple days ago that the actual planted acres this year in 2020 was 5,368. That's down about 2,000 acres from last year. And indoor acreage was up about indoor square footage, sorry, was up about 1 million square foot this year from last year. So that's just interesting to see. And one other thing I note on this, these are the varieties down here that were planted last year in 2019 throughout Minnesota. It's a resounding majority for Finola. One group did go for CBD, but that's generally a grain variety that comes from Finland originally, but it's a Canadian variety. So then just wanted to also mention that we're still part of the hemp pilot program at AURI. We're authorized to be working with hemp, and we hope to have many more projects with hemp at our labs. Our lab in Marshall, they can do fatty acid analysis and different oil analysis on both oil and protein analysis. And then we also do cannabinoid analysis. We offer for, I think it's $250 for 5 tests, so $50 a test to do CBD and THC testing. And we did do a study here in Minnesota this year where we studied a few different fields, one in Austin, one in Fergus Falls, and one in Marshall. And we looked at a bunch of different varieties from these different areas and kind of monitored the THC and CBD rise throughout the season. So we can see really the main takeaways from all of these graphs here that what THC does, CBD does as well. It follows. If CBD goes up, THC also goes up. There's kind of a leveling off that seems to happen throughout the cycle. So you look at Fergus Falls here, we had, between September 1st and September 16th, there really wasn't that much of a change. So they probably harvested right there at about the 16th. And so this is just kind of taking some data that we can share with the Minnesota Department of Ag as they look to make decisions on updating the rules that they'll have to submit in to really figure out a state plan for CBD. So just some extra data that we were able to capture this year. And then just touching briefly on just our current and future hemp related projects. We mentioned that we're involved in a few different fiber market feasibility studies. We've helped size out some CBD hemp drying and curing spaces, doing work on the food seed cleaning and food processing, cannabinoid testing, and more. So always looking for new projects related to hemp and open to discussions with potential clients. And so with that, we also have a full food team that supports on the food side for nutrition facts and labeling, regulatory assistance, guidance on shelf life. They do helping with co-packing, a lot of different things. We have a great food team, and many of these are based out of the Twin Cities, with Ben, exception of Ben being based in Marshall. And then we also have the ability to do some food development in our Waseca lab. We're getting a new food grade facility there, setting up for oil pressing and protein milling. And then, our Waseca co-products lab, that's the 3 amigos there, myself, Al Deering, and Abel Tekes. We operate the lab down in Waseca, and we have a number of pieces of equipment that can support the hemp industry. We've done a lot of pelleting projects on both pre and post extraction CBD. We have a fluid bed dryer. We have, as I mentioned, oil pressing, oil filtering, aspiration, different separation techniques. We have that new decorticator that I mentioned, indent dehuller and an indent clean, or impact dehuller and an indent cleaner. So lots of different opportunities to develop new products with co-products from hemp. And so we welcome those thoughts and ideas, and we're there to help people do that. So we'd hope to hear from you.
Riley, if I can jump in here, just to talk a little bit about what's next for AURI. Obviously what Riley has talked about with Decorticator projects in Waseca, we're ready to do that. both Riley and I are anticipating some tours to Canada, Kentucky, and other places where we've already been invited to actually see things up front and close and personal. This is really important to help accelerate the infrastructure development in our state and such, and that's got to happen as soon as we can travel safely and such. And then I want to say that the business and technical assistance to commercialization projects is so important, because as you look at these markets and you try to authenticate and verify them, it's extremely important to have some clarity in the markets and end user specifications. So that work has to continue, and it is a big job, and it's something that we network with people all over the state and all over the world, really, to try to get as much clarity as we can. So to kind of wrap this up and maybe take some questions, we've said this before from Mark Twain: it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble, it's what you know for sure that ain't so. And there's a lot of that out there in the hemp business, but we're struggling a lot to get as much clarity as we can. There's our contact information for you listeners out there. We're both willing and eager to listen to your projects, see how we can help, and network you with the right opportunities that come forward. So I think, Dan, at this time, turn it back to you, and maybe for maybe a few questions before we wrap up.
All right, Harold, Riley, thanks so much for the great presentation, looking at the hemp industry in Minnesota a year into it. We do have some questions. We're going to start with, are any particular active ingredients being extracted from the seeds that you're aware of?
From the seed, so it would be the oil that's extracted from the seeds, if that's what the question.
That's the only one.
Yeah, that's what we're extracting with the cold press. We're extracting oil from the seeds, and then it's the flour that the CBD comes from. But I might be yeah.
Okay. Can you share more information about the impact dehuller in Waseca? What are the minimum and maximum amounts of seeds that can be run through that machine at this time?
Sure. Yeah. So that machine is a it's a Forsberg piece of equipment. It's their Model 7F impact huller, and it can run about. We haven't run it yet with hemp seed, but I think it will run probably about 100 to 200 pounds of hemp an hour through that process, and then we need aspiration and sieve separation on the back end. So, but yeah, we could probably do. We'd probably look at doing about 50, 100 pounds for a project.
And if you're watching and would like to ask a question, you are still muted, but you can go to the Q&A portal to ask a question. Remember that any regulatory questions should be asked directly to the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Here's a question: is there any research happening right now around hemp impacts on soil health, or using hemp as a cover crop, or with cover crops, I guess they ask?
Yeah, Dan, I think there was that, what I'm aware of, there's the project that was that was proposed to the LCCMR for the year 2020 that was going to be looking at actually hemp in the rotation with corn and soy, and how it affected nitrate levels and stuff in the soil. But with the COVID happening, last I've heard that project has not been funded yet and has been put on hold. But that was the only one that I was aware of in the state that was looking at that. But Harold, I don't know if you know of others.
Yeah, there's a little bit of information from Canada on what they've learned so far that can be obtained, and I think the listener can call us, and maybe we can connect you with some of that information that has been generated as to the environmental impacts of growing hemp.
Has most of the low-hanging fruit been picked already in the hemp industry, or are we just in the very early stages of what's possible?
Well, I think the low-hanging fruit is what is being pursued right now, and as we look at, say, the erosion control mat market and application, I really call that low-hanging fruit, because it's something that's needed in the transportation sector, and when we can get that refined and work through the project that we have slated, I think that's really good. And certainly some of the bedding markets and the hemp herd markets are pretty straightforward in that regard. But you get into some of the more sophisticated things, such as the biocomposites and maybe The graphene issues that Riley mentioned, those need more refinement. And the way we get that is having good information from the end users and that market to really feed us what is it that they're looking for, what is the specification, and then we can build and get systems in the state that can meet that. And then we'll be on our way.
And we'll maybe wrap it up, and you may have touched on this a little bit already, but our final question today, if we were going to use the reverse pitch theory on the industry, what problems right now is the industry dealing with that maybe an innovative entrepreneur could solve?
Well, I'll say something first just on the business side. If there's an entrepreneur, getting really good, sound, solid end user information is so critical, because we have an ecosystem in Minnesota and our neighboring states that we can produce this crop. I'm sure we can process it, but we just want to make sure we're doing the right things so we have a sustainable marketplace for the growers. So that's really critical. And I think on the technical side, I would leave that up to Riley for his comment.
Yeah, I think it would be, I mean, I would say something similar on the end specifications of the products. And it's really in the stage of feasibility right now. It's doing feasibility studies to really understand, what does it cost to produce these end materials, and are they going to compete with, jute and coconut fiber and these other things that I talked about? We need to make sure that the processing to get there isn't, cost inhibitive. And so making sure that, at the end of the day, if a business decides to go into doing hemp fiber or doing hemp grain, that they're going to be making money from it. And so understanding on the technical side, the level of processing that needs to get to the specifications required for the different end markets is very important part of that feasibility process. So,
Riley Gordon, Harold Stanislawski, thank you very much for your time today. That concludes AURI Connects Webinar Wednesday for today, presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. AURI's mission is to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products. In November, we will feature a discussion on more sustainable packaging options for fresh beef. So please join us, AURI, on November 12th as we welcome Dr. Claire Sand back to our Webinar Wednesday for that discussion. That's November 12th from noon till 1. And you can register right now at auri.org/webinar-Wednesday.